Welcome to the Great Awakening Ministry. I am Minister and Yogini Joanne Lee. And on this week's show, we have Alan Heeks. Alan is a group leader, author and pioneer who has over 30 years experience helping people to grow their well-being through contact with nature. He left a successful business career to set up a 130-acre organic farm and education centre and the Seeding Our Future project, which helps individuals, local communities and NHS doctors to build resilience in the face of climate change and other stresses. Alan and his wife, Linda, are keen gardeners and grow much of their food in their garden at home in Wales. Alan's new book, Natural Happiness, is inspiring and practical. It entwines organic gardening strategies with mindful exercises that are proven to improve your well-being, your love of nature and gardening.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Hello, Alan.
To meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. And I just want to say welcome to the Great Awakening show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, really great to be here. And honestly, you're a man after my own heart with all of your natural happiness for Mother Earth. So it's really important today, our little chat.
Right.
So, well, Alan, I believe that humanity, we're all going through a great awakening at this time. And I believe it's a great awakening coming back and living in harmony with the natural world. Yeah, we can have all of this great, technology, but we've also got to come back to the natural world. What does this great awakening mean for you and for us all? How do you see that?
Well, I think the way you put it is really good, Joanne. I think what I'm aware of is it feels like we're really being tested. There's all this kind of fake news, social media that appears to be reality. And actually, we have to make the choice to turn ourselves back towards nature. The whole issue about us being part of the natural world, we're part of nature as well. That's absolutely crucial. And I guess that's one of the main things I'm hoping that my book will help people with. So a lot of people, I think, over COVID realised that just getting out of doors was good for their well-being, which is true. But there's far more to it than that. And that's what I'm hoping the book enables people to do, is just to sort of engage fully, use all their senses, really engage spiritually with nature and emotionally, not just kind of go outside and feel good.
Exactly. Because during that COVID time, some people would just go from the house in their car to work, back from the house in the car to work. They wouldn't even go in nature. And I think a lot of people went into the forest and into the wood, and they really connected at that time, which was one of the positive things that come out of it, wasn't it? But
it was,
for me, when I started awakening, Mother Earth really called me. It was like a divine calling to her, and I went in there, and it was almost like she was healing me, calling me back, those parts of myself that I'd given away to people, places and things. She was like bringing me back to wholeness, if you like, do you find that?
Yeah, very much so. I think that the crucial thing is that we have to slow down and open up to let Mother Nature do that. And that's one of the reasons why I think gardening is such a great thing. If you are a gardener, then you are kind of really in touch with the earth. You're physically engaged with it. If you're not, then at least you can kind of imagine it. You can get outdoors. So I agree with you that I think Mother Earth is an incredible healer.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that, everything we're eating basically depends on Mother Earth. So, she keeps giving despite all the kind of mistreatment that she gets back.
And also, the pranic energy, the life force energy of the trees. They've done, in Japan, they've got forest healing, special forest healing walks. They actually is scientifically proven that, the vibration Mother Earth will lift your vibration. The prana, the chi, the life force energy will actually heal you. Walking with barefoot on the earth,
Yeah.
Mother Earth's ions actually do, they do heighten your vibration and they do give you positive, feelings. It's just so beautiful. We've lost that, haven't we?
Oh, massively. I mean, one of the probably the biggest thing I'm proud of in my adult life is setting up a woodland retreat centre near Salisbury called Hazel Hill Wood. And I'd kind of liked trees, but it's very much like you're saying. I mean, I think trees have an incredible kind of affinity and empathy for people. And so slowly I started to realize what kind of talking with trees would mean. I mean, it's embarrassing
No.
because I came out of a business career, and I can
Yeah.
remember early on thinking, well, I should try and talk to the trees. And I'd literally go along with a checklist, like I was going to interview the tree. And after a while, I realised that it really doesn't work like that. And I think the great thing about communicating with trees is that you have to slow down to the speed of the tree. If you remember the trees in Lord of the Rings, the Ents and Treebeard, it's like, not so fast, young humans, and it really is absolutely on the money, that.
I mean, to me, trees are fearless, silent, powerful beings, and they hold deep wisdom within. I've got a
Yeah.
few of my favorite trees, and these trees have helped me through my journey. They've been my closest confidant. I tell everything to my tree,
Yeah.
and I stand there with my feet on the ground and I commune with them. And I know that they give me answers because they hold so much wisdom. It's like, aren't they like the equivalent of the Akashic records in the spiritual realm? Trees hold that. How can we
Yeah.
commune? How can you tell our audience to commune with the trees and receive
Well,
their answers and their wisdom?
yeah. Well, literally in chapter 1 of my book, which is called Deepen Your Roots, there's an exercise called the tree talk. So it's actually right there in chapter 1, so taking people through a way of, ideally you do this outside with a real tree, but you can do it imagining it if you need to, but really imagining that you're like a tree. You have roots, you have a trunk, you have branches that are where your fruits come out. And to start to imagine, is your root network giving you all the nourishment you need? Is your trunk, if you're like a tree, is your trunk kind of processing all the inputs, and is your branch network kind of overstretched, or could it be expanded? And it's an incredibly powerful analogy. Might also, we were saying, Joanne, that that exercise, there's a video of that on my website, so if people want to kind of actually have me guide them through it,
Yeah.
there's a video of me doing it for a workshop group in an apple orchard.
Yeah, beautiful. And what do we do? Do we ask the trees for, wisdom, guidance?
Well, so I think the first thing is really to meet the tree. So when I'm guiding this, I say, don't just kind of think about picking out a tree. Look, feel yourself drawn to a tree. So, ideally, if you're in an orchard or a wood where there's a lot of trees, make a connection. Let the tree call to you. And that's the start of really making a deep connection. And I say, don't just kind of march up to the tree, stand back and admire it. It's like I'm actually looking at a beech tree out of the window as I'm talking to you. And I think that one of the things we can give back to trees is actually kind of witnessing. So I say, just look at the tree, look at the kind of the courage, the strength, the storms you can see it's lived through, and kind of like witness and admire the tree. So you're giving something to it and you feel engaged with it. And then make physical contact, feel the bark, rub your cheek against the tree, smell the smell of the tree, look at the branches above you. And that's all part of a sort of subtle trick of getting people to slow right down. Because I think the most crucial thing is the thing about slowing down from kind of human speed, which is mostly far too quick. If we can slow down to tree speed, it's incredibly healing for us. And then, as
That's
you say,
right.
we can really access the wisdom of the tree.
Yeah. And isn't tree speed just in the divine moment of now? It's in this moment. It's not in the past or the future. It's
Yeah.
in now space, isn't it? Which is where all animals in the natural world are all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had very much the same experience as you. Like, there are trees that have been my best friends. At Hazel Hill Wood, there's a sort of big beech tree by the main campfire, and I've sat with that tree probably hundreds of times. Over kind of like 20 years or more. So that sense of,
Companionship. It's
coming
almost like
back,
companionship,
meeting.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. No, you meet a friend, you slow down, you sit with it, and then you just had to be very patient, and slowly something starts to come through. You think, okay, I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it might not come through immediately. It might come
exactly.
later
That's the
on.
crucial thing. Yeah, definitely.
Later on, it will
Yeah,
come to you. It's so
yeah,
beautiful. And this
yeah,
is what the ancients used to do all the time.
yeah,
They were at one with Mother Earth.
yeah,
Everything was done with Mother. We've come so far away. We live in these tiny boxes, and we came away from the natural world. And when that happened, we lost our connection. We lost our connection to herbal medicine, which we've been, healing within the natural, with nature, with Mother Earth,
yeah.
herbal remedies, all of that. Instead of big pharma, we've been healing ourselves for thousands of years naturally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think we're coming
And
back to that natural way of
I
being.
think we are, and I think part of the trick, and this is again something I talk about in the book, is I think people tend to think they're like a complex mechanism, that they're like a computer or a car, and actually people are much more subtle and complex than a mechanism. So,
Yes.
this all started for me when I set up an organic farm from scratch, knowing nothing about farming at all, and started to realize what an organism really was. An ecosystem like a farm, like a person, is a really complicated system that works through natural processes that you can't fully understand. But what we can do is give it good inputs and kind of talk to it, recognize that it has an intelligence of its own, like the tree, the land has an intelligence. And if you talk to it and listen to it, then what you can do is kind of steer it in the direction you want. You can't make things happen, but you can actually shape it. And I think, what I came to realize was that having done that with an organic farm, that's much more the way that we need to work with other people or with, human groups, is that kind of listening and steering kind of process.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. Talking to the plants, isn't it? Our consciousness connects because
Yeah,
everything in it, it's just the life force within everything, is it not?
yeah,
That's what it is.
yeah,
That's why plants are so good for us to eat. Plant-based
yeah,
foods, because we are getting the life force energy. They are alive. We are alive. We're not eating
yeah,
dead things. We're alive. We should be eating alive things with the chlorophyll
yeah,
and the life force energy
yeah,
within that. That's so important,
yeah.
isn't it?
Well, it is so, and you have to respect that, the plants, the trees, the land are living beings. So
Yes.
that actually the central chapter on book is about what I call co-creativity. And one of the big inspirations for me was a spiritual community in Scotland called the Fintorn Foundation.
I know it. Yes, yes, yes. The
I thought
Fintorn.
you probably would. And I mean, this was an eye opener to me because, I was working in the gardens, learning about the way that they talk to the nature spirits. And they're the people who use this term co-creativity. And what they mean by that is when you want to try and make something happen, you don't just impose your will. You actually talk to the system. You talk to the nature spirits, the intelligence, the wisdom of the system, and you have a sort of dialogue, almost a dance. And I think that as human life gets more and more complicated, we really need to learn that skill of co-creativity about how we work with nature.
And become more simple. Life becomes more simple instead of being complicated, doesn't it? And
Yeah,
it's not just me, mine, selfish. It's
yeah,
we're one with the land, one with the mother, one with the father, one with our brothers and
yeah,
sisters. It's unity consciousness, isn't it? It's coming away from that
yeah,
that once was. But Alan,
yeah.
can you give us some of your wisdom? What is regenerative agriculture mean? Resilience of depleted land resources, and a little bit about biodiversity as well, because this is
Yeah, sure.
using organic, because
Yeah.
really really good for our audience.
Well, so I had no knowledge about farming or organics before I just followed a wild impulse to drop out of my business career and start an organic farm, and it was a massive education for me. So I've been involved in the organic food and farming sector now for like over 20 years, and one of the things that's interesting about it is there are almost fashions in it. So this whole thing about regenerative sort of came over the horizon maybe about 5 years ago, and I sort of ignored it for a while, and I thought, all right, I need to take this seriously. So I went to visit a couple of regenerative farms, quite big farms, one in Somerset, one in down on Dartmoor. Um, I'd say the crucial thing about regeneration is it's using natural processes to reverse processes of depletion and pollution. And actually, restore a vibrant ecosystem. And I think that there are really big parallels between what you might call environmental sustainability and human sustainability. And that in ways what, the book Natural Happiness is all about, is those parallels. So in terms of regenerative agriculture, one of the things that really impressed me about these farms was that one of their big things was what they call reducing intensity. So, in farms, you talk about what's called a stocking rate, which is usually how many units of livestock you have per acre, or how many tons of a crop you're trying to take off the land per acre. And they said, we've cut it right down. They said, what we're aiming for is quality, not quantity. So we're aiming to sell a smaller quantity of organic wheat or organic meat or whatever it might be, and we can get a higher price for it. And by reducing the intensity, they're cutting out importing, soya feed from the rainforest in Brazil, the things that are really doing the damage,
Yes.
and the things that are actually drying up because of climate change, all these imported food stuff, saying we're basically becoming more self-reliant. So in terms of what people can learn from regenerative agriculture, I think that whole idea of reducing intensity, most of us, we're in a kind of consumer society that is always urging us to consume more, eat more, buy more, do more, travel more. And that idea of back to what you said about simplification. So reducing the intensity of the way we live, it's firstly less depleting, and it's secondly better for the environment because you're not using all these resources.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's, and the other thing that struck me about these farms was that they were improving the resilience of their grassland. So the way they were doing that was they were actually deliberately planting different varieties of grass, which meant that when there was a very long dry period, the grass didn't completely die because it was more deep rooted. And I think there's quite an interesting parallel there for people. It's like, look at the resources you depend on and look at whether those resources are resilient or fragile, and try and sort of almost kind of do an assessment of where your energy, where your support's coming from. I'm talking really about sort of emotional energy as much as kind of like physical. It's all part of one. But I'm not just talking about the energy in your food. I'm talking about the kind of emotional support energy you get from friends and family and work and nature and the rest of it. And quite consciously try and make sure that the ways you're supporting yourself are resilient. And this also comes into your point about diversity. So I can come on to that if you like to.
Yeah, because diversity and biodiversity, because I know a little bit about it, but tell us, give us your wisdom on that. Isn't that about using different plants to, you just tell us. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so if we start with the human world, quite a lot of my work these days is around how we live with the climate crisis and all the pressures it puts on us. And what I keep coming back to is that the crisis we're in is so big, we're not going to get through it as individuals or as individual households. We can get through it, but we have to get through it as communities. We have to share resources, we have to give each other emotional support. And there are some wonderful kind of role models for that in ecosystems, in organic farming.
Yep.
So my favorite one is to qualify as organic. A farm has to leave parts of its fields as what are called wild margins.
Yes.
And wild margin means you don't cultivate every inch of the field. You leave the edges around the corners for wildflowers, wild grasses, and that means that wild insects grow there as well. And what that means is that if you get a pest or a new plant disease coming into your main crop, you hope that the antidote comes from the wild margins. And as I've thought about that for human communities, what I notice is that most human communities tend to go for sameness. You get along with people who agree with you. It's not easy to get along with people who have different views or a bit cranky or a bit of a maverick. But actually what the wild margins thing says is that human community groups really need to be able to accommodate the mavericks, the cranky people, the ones who see things differently, because when you hit a problem, you're going to need that kind of different point of view. So that's one bit. And in a way that also relates to diversity. So one of the big things on organic farms is having diverse crops.
Yes.
And the opposite,
they help each other. They help each other.
They
right.
do. Exactly. I mean, the opposite, big industrial farms is what's called monoculture, meaning you will get a farm that's got like 100 acres of just growing potatoes and
Yes.
usually one variety.
But doesn't
But
that
as you can,
deplete? It depletes the soil after doing the same
absolutely,
thing.
it depletes the soil and also makes it very vulnerable because if it's all one crop of one kind of potato, then, you're going to get potato blight or a pest or something that wipes you out. So organic farms always aim for diversity. Firstly, that they have different crops.
Yep.
So, they'll be growing vegetables and wheat and all the rest of
Together.
it. But even within the
Together.
crop,
Mm,
to
mm,
get, yeah.
mm, mm.
But then what they'll do is they don't just grow one variety of wheat, they'll grow several varieties. So if they get a problem like a pest or a disease, it'll affect one variety, but it usually won't affect all of them.
Brilliant.
And so I think for people, how I'd map that across for people is partly what I was saying about resources. Try and make sure that your resources are resilient, but also diverse. So
Mm.
if you need emotional support, just don't just depend on one individual like your best friend, because that's just asking too much of them. Try and sort of spread your support network and have a diversity of ways that you get your nourishment.
Or spiritual support. Go within and find that beautiful divine love light energy, that's from the
Definitely.
creator. That's
Yes.
meditation. It's like spiritual
Yeah.
support. It's so good. You can't find it
Absolutely.
out there. Go within.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
say. But
No, I agree.
that's so beautiful. It's so interesting to do that. Because I believe, I mean, we've got so many trees lining the streets. Why aren't they fruit trees?
Mm.
For
Yeah.
people just to walk along and pick the fruit. It's ridiculous. How many,
Yeah. Yeah.
and gardens, all people's front gardens, back gardens have got these perfect lawns.
Yeah.
Grow food. This is the
Yeah.
time. Why is this so important now, Alan, for us to learn and have gardening skills and grow our own food? Because there's going to be a
Well,
problem later on.
there's going to be a problem probably sooner than later, to be honest. I mean, I find it very frustrating that most people, if you look at opinion surveys, most people agree there's a climate crisis, but most people just feel like they can't cope with it. Um, from my point of view, the biggest impact the climate crisis is like to have on us in the UK in the next few years is actually about food shortages. You've already seen little bits of it, and all the forecasts that I see say, the weather's getting more extreme. They're getting more crop failures, not only in the UK, but in the Mediterranean countries where a lot of our fresh fruit and vegetables come from. So it's really urgent that we start growing more ourselves.
So,
And you're absolutely right. I mean,
and also
yeah,
you've got to think about all of the the modified seed that all of the big companies use, and all of the
yeah,
pesticides and all of the disgusting chemicals that they use. If they
yeah,
just stopped poisoning the earth, poisoning the air, poisoning us with massive vaccines, they poison everything.
yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't be ill, and we wouldn't have so many people going to hospitals in this time. If they
Well,
just
absolutely.
stop doing all of that and we just
Yeah,
start growing our own, because when you grow your own, it's organic, isn't it? There's
yeah,
nothing better. I lived in Italy. There's nothing better
yeah.
than going outside and picking your own salad and going in and eating it. Wow, it's just wonderful
It's
feeling.
amazing. It really is. Well, I mean, the sad thing is, I don't think all of the big companies are going to stop doing what they're doing. So the best
Yeah.
thing we can do is take it into our own hands, and, like you said,
Hmm.
start, growing in our own back gardens. And I mean, there are towns where they've started to plant, fruit trees on the grass verges and vegetables. Say, just pick it off the grass verge.
That's
So
brilliant.
it's doable, and it's
That's
also very good
yeah.
for your own well-being. Like we were saying, that contact with the earth is so healing for people.
It's so important. That is really
Yeah.
important. And then as that happens, I believe it will be, because I believe that in this great awakening that we're in, but a lot of people are going to be moving out. I mean, I'm looking to do my ministry, my land, and have people retreat place where I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So many people will be start moving out of the cities and find that land to start their communities, to
Yeah.
be, for their sustainable, organic place, beautiful retreats where they're going to have and grow their own food. I think it's going to become more and more and more like that. And then
Yeah.
of course we're going to go back to the systems when, we used to go down to the local farmers market and have more farmers markets, more bartering, more people of that way, go back to the local communities in that
Definitely.
sense,
Yeah.
which is the way that we used to live in tribal communities and things like that,
yeah,
instead of living in just tiny little 2.5 children with houses, like, and no one speaks to each other anymore. This is where we've
yeah,
lost community and connection as human beings with each other. We need to
yeah.
have that with the elders and the young people getting taught by the grandfathers and the mothers and the fathers, that sense of
Yeah.
community. We need that.
Well, absolutely, and I mean, I've been involved in 2 or 3 community market gardens, and what's lovely is that growing food together is one of the best ways of rebuilding community. Because you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. An awful lot of people have lost that quality of community. They're just living in their own little sort of, house with their own front door, and I think they've almost lost the skills for it. The skills to listen and cooperate and sort out arguments. But oddly, working with a community market gardener, there's a lot of evidence that says that that's a really great way of rebuilding communities. So,
Yes.
my hope would be that we're going to see, I mean, we are seeing growth in community market gardens, but we need it to grow a lot bigger and faster.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Wow,
Mm.
that's absolutely brilliant. It's so beautiful.
Yeah,
And how can we have what are some of the ways that we can have a dialogue with our gardens, when we're
mm,
there? Just
yeah,
give us a few simple tools to have
yeah.
that beautiful dialogue.
Well, so there's a whole chapter in my book Natural Happiness called Natural Inspiration, and it's absolutely about what you're saying. And these are methods that I've seen working at the Findhorn Foundation, spiritual community for many years, and my wife and I have adopted them in our own garden. So I think the first thing is you have to believe that there is a spiritual presence, that there is a spiritual life in your garden, that there's a wisdom there, and there is something or someone that you can speak to.
Yes.
And the main way that we would do that, another sort of piece of Findhorn terminology, is what they call attunement.
Mm.
So they have this wonderful vegetable garden called Cullen Gardens up there. It's on the northeast coast of Scotland. It's quite windswept, but it's a beautiful garden, very productive. And so before you start a shift there, the group join hands in a circle, and they do what's called a tuning, and that means they're basically trying to tune in between the people and the spirits of the land that they're going to work with. And it's almost like courtesy. It's like you wouldn't walk into somebody's front room. Well, if you walk into a garden, it's courtesy to present yourself to the spirits of the land and say, we're here to grow food, but we want to do it in a way that respects, the wildlife in the garden and the needs of the earth and so on. So we're here to listen. We're here to be co-creative, and that's what my wife and I do. So when we start to work in particularly our vegetable garden, we'll just sit down for a few minutes and we'll say, we're presenting ourselves. We want to kind of plant our parsnips this morning. We're asking that the spirits of the land bless what we're doing and guide what we're doing. And then we don't just rush off and start. We actually sit for a few minutes. So we're basically meditating with the garden, but we're
Yes.
sitting there listening, and we're saying, if there's anything you need to tell us, we're here listening. We're here to kind of work with you.
That's so beautiful. And it's in the asking. We've got our angels and the spiritual, whatever you want to call it, your spirit guides, God, Goddess, source, whatever you want to call it, all around us all the time.
Yeah,
And it's in the asking that we honor them. We respect
absolutely.
them. We honor them. We bring it to life, because otherwise, if you don't ask, they're not going to come in and help us,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they have to be invited to with your invocation.
yeah,
Asking is so important. It's like me. I believe Mother Nature is my church. Yeah.
yeah. Lovely.
Jesus
Yeah.
didn't have a church. Yeah.
No,
He
no.
preached on the mount. He was outside. He was he was in the forest for 40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's where he was, right? But also,
yeah,
and it's such a simple thing. It's like when I make my food, I thank, source. I thank God, Goddess for my food. And it spiritualizes it. It makes it
yeah,
taste
yeah,
infinitely better, because you're honoring that food. It's like the
yeah.
American Indians, what they used to do, when they went on the land, they didn't just stand there begging for rain when they wanted
Mm,
rain. They
mm.
put their hands together, but they used their imagination. They
Yeah,
smelt it, all of their
yeah,
senses. They
yeah,
imagined it. They
yeah.
felt the rain on and smelt it on the ground. And,
Mm,
that's using their
yeah,
consciousness to have that connection with the consciousness, the one
yeah,
consciousness around us all.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's beautifully put, and I think the more you can kind of put that quality of imagination into manifesting what you would like from your garden,
Yeah,
and yeah, back to co-creativity, and realize that you're working in partnership with the spirits of the land and with the physicality of the land. So
that is
yeah, no,
beautiful.
it's beautifully put. Thank you.
Yeah, that is just so amazing, because we've lost that sacredness, you know, the holiness, the sacredness that our ancestors used to have. They used to have the ceremonies and the rituals out in the nature and all of that. They used to really respect, the sun and the moon and the cycles and the biorhythms, and I think that I know that. I mean, it's just to say this is really silly, but the Gregorian calendar that we have now is completely out of sync. We used to
Mm,
have the 13th lunar calendar with the 13 moons, and
yeah,
it used to come from the divine feminine, the goddess, because they had, with their cycles with the moon
yeah,
time. But they paid, the bishops came in and they changed it. I mean,
yeah,
that lunar calendar is 28, 28, 28, 28, 28 for 13
yeah,
months, and it's one rollover. How easy is
yeah,
that? It's just so
yeah,
ridiculous that we now
yeah.
have this calendar and we are out of sync
Mm,
with the earth. We are out of the
yeah,
we are not in our normal biorhythms because, we're so fast, and because of
mm,
this, the crazy, calendar that's been put on us, and these times
yeah,
and this,
yeah,
because of time, don't you think?
yeah. Well, yeah, and I think this is where the more that you can feel yourself part of nature and connect with it, the less you're going to get messed around by all these artificial man-made
Yes,
patriarchy type things. So,
exactly.
if you've got a garden, that'll keep you kind of steady, and if not, at least get out into the parks, try and find a community garden. So I agree. I think, modern human culture is absolutely crazy. I think it's
Yes,
driving us crazy, and we have to
yes.
keep pulling ourselves back to nature to sort of survive and be happy.
Um, in the yogic texts, it's called Maya. Yeah, like Maya, the temptation of Maya, and I call it Maya and the Matrix. Yeah, because that's what it is. It's like
Yeah,
that 3D construct world that has been made by governments and people, and it's not God made, it's man made through
yeah,
ego, through all of that. And that has taken us so far away from who we really are, from our divinity, from our natural connection to the mother, the
yeah,
mother earth and father sky, I believe. you
yeah.
know
No, I agree. Yeah,
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 totally. But this is a great awakening, and we're coming back to it now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. And I love this bit. Uh, the skills we need to release, the daily stresses, communing with that garden, even if you have that window garden, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
on your balcony, you're still
Mm,
having that communion with that. You're still out in the sun, you know,
yeah.
go out in the moonlight. Moonlight, I believe that moonlight's really good for fruits and vegetables as well as the sun.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. But yeah, you're right. I mean, even if you're in a city, there are plenty of ways of kind of trying to keep yourself grounded and that sense of being part of nature, not outside of it.
So true. And
Yeah.
and in your book, um, the seven seeds of natural happiness.
Mm. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Okay. So the real sort of wake up call for me was getting involved in starting this organic farm from scratch, having no idea about organics. So, I was quite good at managing businesses. So I think I was also quite good at analysing how systems work. And after several years of getting this organic farm up and running, I had this real light bulb moment where I thought, but hang on, this organic farm is a fantastic kind of teaching model for people. It's a really great model for how people can cultivate human nature. So I then started to look at what the main elements were in an organic farm, how it becomes fruitful. And I mapped those into how human beings can be fruitful and resilient. So the first three chapters of the first three seeds are really about kind of self-care. So the first one's about nourish your roots. It's that idea of understanding that we have roots talking to trees, basic things about connecting with nature. And then the second chapter is called natural energy sources. So I think one of the big problems that people have, just like industrial farms, is that we're very dependent on artificial ways of driving us forward. Artificial sources of energy that are polluting and depleting, just like the artificial fertilizers. So I started to look at, well, what's the alternative? And so for people, it's things like appreciation. It's like I've managed companies, and what I started to realize was that if everybody was sort of depressed and backbiting and criticizing each other, the morale went down, and the organization wasn't effective. But I could actually start to change it, because if I gave out appreciation to other people, they started to give it out to each other, they started to give it back to me. So it's like you kind of build up a sort of upward spiral. So I think appreciation is a wonderful, it's like sunlight, it's an abundant, clean energy source. And the other one that I really highlight is
infectious as well, isn't it? It's infectious.
That's right.
What you give out,
that's
you
the
get
point.
back.
It's like if you start being appreciative, other people will pick up on it. And the other big source that I think is another sort of clean energy source that we can easily harness is inspiration. Yeah. So I know people get nervous about the word spiritual, but actually I think most people are in desperate need of a sense of spiritual purpose and connection.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful about the language, but to start to talk to people about, what's your vision? What are you hoping for? What inspires you? What makes you enthusiastic in your life? I think that's a fantastic energy source. And again, these are clean energy sources. And then the third chapter, in some ways my favorite, is called Composting Your Troubles. So I've run a lot of workshops using these 7 seeds for all sorts of people. I mean, from confused, bewildered teenagers through to very, very stressed out NHS doctors. And I find that these seeds work pretty well for all of them. And the one that people get the most excited about is composting. So I say, if you think about gardens and farms, if they're organic, then one of the main sources of growth is compost.
Yeah.
And compost is simply taking, the rubbish, the waste, the smelly, yucky stuff, and by composting it, you actually turn it into a nice, clean smelling source of future fertility. And I said, well, now think about, all the kind of negative emotions that you're probably pushing away, or your anxious thoughts that keep going round and round your head, and think how much energy you're using trying to push them away or suppress them. And imagine that instead of that, you can actually compost them. So you can kind of extract the clean energy out of your negativity and discard the dark stuff. And I actually take people through a kind of simple circular breathing exercise as one way of doing that. And even in kind of like 10 minutes, people start thinking, wow, I get this. I can see that I can do this. And I think this is, a really crucial thing for people, because most of us are quite depleted and polluted, just like the land is.
Yes.
So the idea that we can clean up our act, is part of the regeneration thing, really.
Yeah.
Is we have to kind of compost our rubbish.
That's
and start to kind of, harness the positive energy that's in it.
Yeah. And we can do that, emotionally, physically, we clean ourselves. Yeah. Don't we?
Yeah.
So it's important to do it emotionally and spiritually. That meditation for me is just like cleaning away your mind, the cobwebs and the negativity of your mind. Getting rid of the crap, getting rid of the, like composting.
Absolutely. It's getting rid of the crap, composting the crap. So then finish off the seeds. The fourth one is co-creativity, the thing I told you about, which I think is a really crucial skill.
Yes.
So now we're more into skills, the kind of skill that an organic gardener or farmer uses. The fifth chapter is about community. So that's some of what we talk about, like the wild margins and diversity. Sixth chapter is about growing through climate change. So things like how we can use parallels from regenerative agriculture and some of the sort of ways of kind of like facing into the sort of difficult feelings around climate change and kind of growing through them. So that's quite important to me, and I think a lot of people need it. And then the last of the 7 seeds is about inspiration. So some of the things we already talked about of, talking to the nature spirits, really getting on a wavelength with nature rather than just thinking that human reality is the only reality.
Exactly. And, that's where we've gone wrong. That ego has taken over. I think, that we are not a part. We are not connected. We are not a part of the natural world when we are.
Yeah.
We are totally connected to the natural world. Our body goes into the earth. Our soul goes up to heaven to be reborn, or whatever you want to say, goes into the spiritual world. But our body goes into, the earth to be ground down over however long and to be regenerated into something completely different. It's just
Well, I mean,
unbelievable,
absolutely.
that
Yeah, they came out of
regeneration.
the earth.
Yeah,
And you were talking about sort of like tribal and indigenous societies, and everything I've understood about them is that they really still do see themselves as a part of nature, not disconnected.
they do. They
Yeah,
do. That's why you look at animals, dogs, they are so in the moment, in the divine now, where everything really is. They're not worrying. They're not,
yeah,
stressing. They're just
yeah,
here
yeah,
now, at one with the earth, with the
yeah,
mother, with the father, and they're just really happy. That's
yeah,
just, and we can learn so much from being in nature as well. I believe it's
yeah,
the most healing. Well, what do you feel like when you've come back from the forest? You
yeah,
feel
absolutely.
so high, you feel vibrationally, beautiful. And also, it's really important to be thankful, for
Mm,
what we have in this world, to
yeah,
not take, but to be
yeah,
thankful for what we have and for what we've taken.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I mean, it said, Mother Earth is so generous.
Yeah,
She's feeding us, she's nourishing our well-being, and you're right. Thankfulness is one of the things we can give back to the trees and the land and the plants, I think.
yeah, to honor them, to honor
Yeah,
them, you know.
definitely. Yeah,
It's so,
yeah,
and it's not being woo woo. It's being real. It's being at
yeah.
one. It's being
It is.
it's
Yeah,
it's it's knowing your heritage. This is our heritage. It's our birthright to live as a living man and a living woman on this earth. It's our
yeah,
birthright to be at one with the Mother Earth. To
yeah,
not being taken into the 3D matrix maya temptation of all the consumerist, BS, because that's what it is.
yeah.
You don't
Well, it
need
is.
any of that. We don't need any of that. That's what we're talking about, having more of that simple life. I
Yeah,
can't wait to
yeah,
move out of, the suburbs and onto the land.
yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's just going
Yeah,
to be
and
wonderful,
well, and we know that. I mean, stress levels are like at all-time high, so it's quite clear that the current way of living is not actually
sustainable.
sustainable. It's not satisfying, and you're right. It's like there is at least a clear roadmap of how to get back to basics, and back to what I was saying about reducing intensity.
Mm,
It's like living simpler with nature,
yeah.
and hopefully natural happiness will kind of guide people in that direction.
What a wonderful book that is, Alan. Honestly, thank you for everything you've done in this beautiful book. Where can we read your book?
Right, so it's called Natural Happiness. You can get it at bookshops, you can get it online with Amazon or Abe or any of the online booksellers. It's also worth mentioning there's a website called naturalhappiness.net. So if you want to kind of check it out, quite a lot of the resources, quite a lot of the ideas that I've talked to you about are available for free on the website. There's some videos, there's some write-ups of processes that you can guide yourself through. So I would love people to buy the book. I think it's had very good reviews. I think it's kind of in a way it's almost written for people who don't like self-help books. Is the way I put it. It's like
I
people
love
who kind of
that.
are allergic to self-help books who don't want any of that funny jargon. It's
Yeah,
not. There isn't jargon. It's very down to earth, and I think that's why gardening images are so easy to engage with. Because it's about simple things like seeds and earth and compost. It's not abstract or theoretical. It's
that's right.
growing from things that all of us have an idea of.
Yeah. And it's beautiful because you're mixing it together. Our
Yeah,
humanity, you know,
yeah,
and our natural being, which is one, we are one with the earth. We are one with the earth. And when we realize that, it's like, we can't, when we realize that, it makes us realize about each other, like we can't harm each other, because harming each other, you realize you're really harming ourselves.
yeah,
Because everything is a
yeah,
big circle, and what you give out, you get back. It's like, this is where we've got to be now. Stop harming our animals.
yeah,
The things that we do to animals, let alone to each other, is just awful.
mm,
So having more of a conscientious, spiritual, beautiful, loving empathy for our
Yeah.
natural environment is so important at this time.
Well, definitely, and I think that's where reconnecting with nature around us can kind of lead us back to that sense of oneness and respect and gratitude.
Yes, definitely. Ah, Alan, this has been an absolutely wonderful, beautiful, show. And I just want to say thank you for being on the Great Awakening show.
It's been a delight. Lovely to talk with you, Joanne. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.